Hello and welcome to the inaugural Football Outsiders Coach Ranking Show of the 2022 season. Week 1 is in the books. I'm your host, Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst with Football Outsiders. Joining me as he will every week is Vince Verhei, Football Outsiders Assistant Editor. Vince, I mentioned we're through Week 1. All the games are in the books. Ended on a very high note for you out there in Washington with that Seattle victory. What was going through your mind during that game?
It was very, very exciting. Some mixed emotions, to put it charitably, because frankly, in the Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll divorce, I tend to be on Russell's side of things more often than not. But either way, no matter which team I had been cheering for up to the final play, I would have been outraged and furious at the terrible process and much worse decision making that went into the kick of the gun, which I guess is what we're here to discuss today.
Absolutely. We will get right into that. Yeah, Sunday or Monday night was a great game, I guess, depending on which side you were on. But there was a lot of excitement in there. Russ kind of trying to make the comeback, fall short through, I don't want to say no fault of his own, but no help from his head coach. He had an opportunity where he probably could have. Some guys on that team were expecting some bigger fantasy days too. Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy did get the touchdown, had a big day. Rashad Penny didn't really have a great game. But it's not all about your season-long fantasy. Play on Underdog Fantasy with us, and you can double your first deposit. You can get $100 for free with promo code Outsiders. Even with the NFL best ball season over, which is what they are very, very well known for, Underdog does have other user-friendly game formats to really spice up all the games. Try their Battle Royale, which is like a 6-round best ball style draft, simpler chances to win than you have with your traditional fantasy sports sites. Or you can try their Pick'em games, which I did on Monday night, only got I think 2 or 3 out of the 5, but you can wager on players' chances to go higher or lower than their projected stat lines. Those are available even in states where traditional prop betting is not currently available. Underdog is the fastest growing fantasy site around. Join the fun over there at UnderdogFantasy.com, or you can download the Underdog app in the App Store. Again, promo code Outsiders gets you $100 for free. They'll double your first deposit up to $100 with that promo code Outsiders. And don't forget about FO Plus, our premium subscription with Football Outsiders, where you can get access to premium articles, stats, betting picks, fantasy projections each week, a whole lot of great stuff on there. You can get that at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. Now let's get into the juicy content, those decisions we're talking about. We'll get to the Broncos in a minute, Nathaniel Hackett. We'll start with some good, though. Brian Daboll, that 2-point conversion to win the game, basically, for the Giants, still had a chance for Tennessee to win. They did have a chance. The Giants had about a 4.5% greater win probability when kicking the extra point versus going for 2. And now what kind of goes into that is a minute 6 left in the game. Tennessee still had 1 timeout left. There was plenty of time to get into field goal range, which they did, and they only needed the field goal when they missed it. But there's some different behavior that goes into when you're trailing versus tied. So, Vince, what were you thinking when they made that decision to go for 2 instead of just go for the tie?
In most situations with a minute to go or whatever it was, there's plenty of time for Tennessee. Mm-hmm. In most situations, I would have said they should have kicked it for the tie because of what you just said. If you kick it for the tie, the other team is most likely going to settle for overtime, and you can try to win there. If you go for 2 and take the lead, now you're forcing them to go for a field goal and beat you. And you're forcing them to play aggressive, which you typically don't want to do. Now, in this case, for the Giants, I thought that was their best chance to win because I did not trust them to get another scoring chance in overtime. I looked the stats over, and they were more even than I expected, but the Giants' offense on Sunday was built on big plays. Saquon Barkley had I think a 60-some yard run. Yeah. They had the long touchdown pass, 60-some yards, and Barkley also had a 33-yard run. And those 3 plays were something like 40% of their total yardage. Wow. So they were not a smooth operating machine all day. They got a couple of explosives that kept them in the game and gave them a chance to win it, and they took the chance and won, and then they got a little bit fortunate when Tennessee missed the field goal. So you got to be lucky, but in their case, I think they were also smart.
Yep, and you look at it too, you mentioned they're more aggressive. Tennessee would be if they're down, teams in general. Especially with being favored in overtime in this case, you could also make the argument, I guess, that they've played to a tie so far. It's 50-50 in overtime. But Tennessee, by our model, would be favored in overtime. So, and even if they kick the PAT and tied it, the Giants are still underdogs, losing about 1 out of every three times from that point forward. We're really not super high on the Giants' offense, as you mentioned, like 3 plays made up about 40-something% of their offense, and just our preseason projections. Daniel Jones, he's in his 5th year now.
I am among those who I'm among those who predict the Giants to get the first pick in the draft.
Yeah, I may be apologizing to a lot of people soon too, because I was surprised I was one of a few people, but to pick Seattle to be the number one pick. They started off pretty well. But yeah, the Giants, their chances of converting that 2-point conversion too are likely below league average. And even after they did take the lead, they were still only 55% chance to win. And in the end, we know, and we've kind of explained these a lot throughout the years, those 2-point conversions a lot of times come down to gut feeling. Like, we know what happens before the game. We know it's Daniel Jones on offense. We know it's Derrick Henry on offense for the Titans, Saquon Barkley, but we don't know what's happening in the game. And a lot of times when it comes down to this, like with John Harbaugh last year in the game against Green Bay, he knew he had no defense at all to stop Aaron Rodgers and was going for 2 to take the win, even though with Justin Tucker, we like the extra point better in that situation. But at this situation, Brian Daboll is trying to change the culture from what was there with Joe Judge before and build a winning culture. And I think that had a lot to play into that decision as well.
Yeah, it's important to remember you use the numbers, but you use them as a baseline. Like most numbers are just league average because you need a large sample size to study a number. You can't study 2 numbers and draw any meaningful conclusion. So you take what most teams do, and then you say, well, if this is close, let's apply our circumstances to it. Maybe the other team's got a lineman out. Maybe we've got a lineman out. Yep. Maybe I don't know. You notice some tendency that they can exploit to get this extra 2 yards. So I don't think you should ever just live and die by the numbers. But you start with that as your baseline and then apply your specific circumstances to them.
And that's one thing I think a lot of people don't understand, especially about the analytics community. I think they just look at the numbers and that's it. And that's not what we do. Like you said, we also understand, like we admit, the numbers say going for the extra point was probably the better decision, but we completely understand and aren't going to fault Brian Daboll for going for it, because it is more, just like you said, it's more than just going by the numbers. You go kind of add that to some common sense and intuition as well.
Right.
So now we'll move on to the more exciting part. And Vince, you put out a tweet on Monday night saying this seems like a good time to mention that Ian O'Connor and I will be hosting the Football Outsiders Coach Rankings podcast this Wednesday. Yeah. If Nathaniel Hackett is not number 32, I'm going to be very upset. Now, I will say he's not number 32, but that's only because 21 coaches faced what we call non-obvious fourth down decisions that aren't a minute left down by 14. But I get what you meant, and he is 21st out of 21.
They had problems. They did not look like a professional outfit for the majority of that game. But we'll get into detail. I know if you're listening to the show, you already know the gist of what happened. But they had a 4th and 5. I forget the 46 or whatever, just across midfield, about a minute to go, and the clock running, and all 3 timeouts. And as you all know, they opted to let the time run down, call a timeout, and kick the 64-yard field goal, or to attempt a 64-yard field goal for the win. So there's so much to discuss here and break this down. Now, as I mentioned, they look sloppy and disorganized all night long, and they appear like they were trying to run a play. And then at the very last second, Russell Wilson turned to the ref and called timeout. But it's very clear if you watch the whole thing in detail, and I've watched it a few times just trying to comprehend what happened. Once the 3rd down play was tackled in bounds, bringing up 4th and 5, Denver from the get-go was saying, we're kicking this field goal from here right now. Because the clock's running down, they line up for a play. Maybe they were just hoping Seattle would jump and get, hand them 5 more yards, which is huge in that situation. Even if it was a long 5, it would have been a first down. There's a big difference between a 59-yard field goal and a 64.
Huge difference.
But the clock is running, and people were saying, I saw some people suggest this was all Wilson's fault because, again, he was disorganized. They had a couple of delay games. They had problems with play clock all night. And that's not wrong. But coaches are also allowed to call timeouts. And for the record, I did some real quick research here while you were doing your excellent ad read, by the way. That was very slick, very, very polished. 2 field goals in the history of the National Football League of 64 yards and more. There were 29 conversions on 4th and 5 in the NFL last year alone. So I know which way I would have gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something, too. I know he came out, I think it was yesterday, Nathaniel Hackett came out and said, obviously, he'd do it differently, and that it was their plan. I think McManus said if they can get to the 46, he can kick it. And to be fair, one thing I will say that the way that I saw it, the angle on TV, it looked like he had the distance on both. The first one where Denver they called the timeout, I think he was way off. The second one was close, but still, it doesn't make it a good decision. That's the thing we always try and make clear is just because even if he would have made the field goal, yes, they'd have won. Yes. does not make that the right decision, even if he makes it 1 out of 20 times, and the one time you kick it is the one time he makes it. But it was really surprising too, coming from Matt LaFleur's system. LaFleur was first in our coach rankings back-to-back years, last year and the year before. And in that system, I wouldn't be surprised to see, especially learning from this mistake, first game as a head coach, for him to be more aggressive from where he's come from and just learning from this. But it was a tough one to make in the first game.
Yeah, not the start you're looking for. Memorable, but the good news is there's nowhere to go but up from here.
Absolutely, and we don't have to. He doesn't have to completely harp on the bad, because he did have a promising start. Had a 4th and goal go from the 1, was the right decision, increased their win probability. But over 5%, that's pretty common these days. I think it was 4th and goal from the 1 of those that they fumbled. You don't see many coaches kick it there, but sometimes we still do see it sometimes, and we hammer them for it. But started off well, went downhill. The pressure was on late, and he folded. Ended up giving up more than twice the win probability on 4th down decisions alone than any other coach in week 1. Around like 29%, I think it was. I had it here earlier. It's 23.6% is what he gave up on 4th down decisions alone. So a rough start. He gained 5.3 on the 1, but still over 18%, 18% lost is not a good start. But like you said, nowhere to go but up from here. So and if you were watching that game or following us on Twitter, you would have seen after the fact too. That's something we've got. Brian Knowles was running the model live and in contact with Aaron. Aaron and Brian both put that out. But you also may have seen that in our Discord as well. We've got that going during the games on Sundays, on Monday night, on Thursday night. So don't forget to join us there, where you can catch some of these numbers live. We'll always have them on the show for the big decisions after the fact. But don't forget to go there, and then the FO Plus subscription as well get you access to some premium articles that will cover some of these decisions, as well as plenty of other NFL stories and analytics as well. So now, going to stick with this game. We're going to go to the opposite sideline. Something I noticed early on and was very surprised about this, was wondering if that was actually Pete Carroll on the sideline, or maybe someone in a Pete Carroll costume coming out throwing the ball, facing a 4th and 1 at the Denver 7, choosing to go for it. I thought he was going to go up there, try and get him to jump, call a timeout, kick a field goal like he's done, because Pete Carroll has not been aggressive, notoriously conservative. He's 31st in our 4th down rankings, or 4th down decision-making metric last year, 28th in 2020, and 31st in 2019. So not good at all here over the last 5-6 years. Has Pete Carroll turned over a new leaf, or do you think this was more a product of his opponent, and the fact we all know that Seattle, you guys wanted to beat Russell Wilson, a lot of boos from the fans. Do you think Carroll keeps this going forward, or is this kind of a one-off thing, that one of those we see every once in a while?
So I don't have the numbers for this in front of me, but my impression just from watching these games for the Seahawks play is that Carroll is very, very aggressive, but he's aggressive in the sense that he loves to punt. So it's more I mean that he loves punting, but that's more punting on 4th and 1 from the 40, for example. That's a Pete Carroll decision. Yep. He has been, like I said, I don't have the numbers here, but I feel like he has been reasonably aggressive on 4th and 1 in the red zone, that kind of thing. He'll go over the touchdown instead of the field goal, because if he did fail on that 4th and 1, in fact, because Geno slipped on the sneak. But he failed, but he left Denver with bad field position, which is what he loves to do. So in Carroll's mind, there's virtually no downside to going for it down at the end of the field. It's going for it near midfield, where he absolutely will not do that kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't think this is that out of character for him. It was maybe more aggressive than he usually would. I think part of it was, I want to say that was Seattle's second drive, and before Denver got their defense together in the second half, they were all out of sorts. There were mistakes left and right. So that probably played a part in his decision too. So is this a new Pete Carroll? I don't think so. And the fact that the play failed, if anything, is only going to make him more conservative.
Absolutely. And now you mentioned those midfield 4th downs that he definitely does not go for. Someone who does go for those and did a lot last year and was really hammered for it is Brandon Staley. In that same division with the Broncos. Extremely aggressive last season, finished 1st in our 4th down decision-making metric, gained almost a half a win on the season overall in total 4th down decisions. Went for it on a 4th and 1 this past week at the Las Vegas 28 late in the second quarter. Came up short, but it's still good to say he carried that forward. That's something we expect to see from him. I think I don't think he's gonna come off of that. 1 quarter earlier, though, he did have a really bad punt on 4th and 1 at midfield I think it was at their own 49 or the Vegas 49, anyway, right there at midfield, which cost them 4.5% in win probability. Not something you'd expect from him. Again, made up for it later. But coming into this game on Thursday, we know the Thursday night football game between the Chiefs and Chargers is going to be a great one between the lines. No Keenan Allen. That hurts the Chargers a little bit, but still should be a fantastic game. We've got a great coaching matchup as well between Andy Reid and Brandon Staley. I mean, Andy Reid has finished 4th, 2nd, and 6th in our last 3 coach rankings. I mentioned Brandon Staley was number 1 in the 4th down decision-making metric last week. So going to be a really good matchup there. But is there anything specific you're looking for from the Chargers against Mahomes? We saw what Arizona did last week. That did not work. What are you looking for between the 2 coaches in this one?
Well, Arizona's strategy against Mahomes was ridiculous. I think I saw a stat they blitzed him on more than half the plays. Don't blitz Patrick Mahomes, everyone. Just don't do it. He'll eat you alive. It's ridiculous.
I think I saw they played single high on like 24 of his 39 pass attempts. Like it was.
Yeah, the first time he had been blitzed on more than half the plays of his career, and that's ridiculous because he eats blitzes alive. When in 2017, which is the last year Alex Smith was quarterback in Kansas City, the Chiefs were 17th in DVOA against the blitz. They've been 1st or 2nd every year since. Wow. And they're still very, very good against non-blitzes too, by the way, but the gap is still significant. He gets better when you blitz him every year without fail. And it's funny because last year, that was the early part of the year when he was struggling with turnovers and the Chiefs were struggling with turnovers. Mm-hmm. The story going around is the cover 2 Patrick Mahomes' kryptonite, which is ridiculous because he does well against that too. And every other team, every other quarterback has kind of similar numbers because usually when teams are playing conservative, it's because they're way ahead. But the fact is, he does much better against blitzes than against zones or against even just cover 2 shells. So you need to take away the big play from Patrick Mahomes. You want to keep him in the pocket, keep guys in front of you, and make your tackles. That's how you beat Mahomes and the Chiefs, or that's your best bet of beating Mahomes and the Chiefs, I should say, because a lot of teams have tried that and still lost. But that's the best thing for the Chargers to do. Now, the good news for the Chargers is Derwin James probably won't get a sack for the 2nd week in a row because, again, don't blitz. No blitzing. Stay back. But they have a front 4 that shouldn't need to blitz to pressure opposing quarterbacks. Khalil Mack in his Chargers debut had 3 sacks. Joey Bosa chipped him in the second half. So let those guys carry your defense. Let them carry the load. Everyone else drop back and do damage control and just keep the game close and hope Herbert can win it at the end.
Yeah, with something that remember from the ALMANAC this year in the Chargers chapter, they spent a lot of money, a lot of their resources on that pass defense. Their kryptonite last year was the run defense. Brought in Khalil Mack. They didn't really make a ton of other additions. I think Sebastian Joseph Day came in, but a lot of their resources went towards the secondary. And this is one of those games where they're gonna really be tested early in the season as against that Chargers. I don't know if J.C. Jackson is expected to be back. I know he didn't play last week though.
I'm pretty sure he's out for a couple weeks still.
Okay, I missed that.
If he's out, or even if he's playing but still probably not 100%, that's even more reason you don't want to be playing man coverage. It's all the more reason to take a deep breath and like I say, play damage control.
Yeah, so definitely going to be a good one though. Last year, the Chargers pulled out that one in week 2 on an aggressive decision from Brandon Staley. It was like a 4th and 7 or 4th and 8. Passed up a field goal to tie it late in the game. Chose to go for it. Ended up converting. That was a decision I remember we actually did not like. We liked the field goal just because it was a long 4th down. Got a chance to tie it there. They were pretty far from the end zone, but still within a reasonable field goal range. But it paid off for the Chargers last year. They won it and then lost that thriller in overtime there in mid-December. So going to be a great one. 2 great coaches. We know Andy Reid is aggressive when he needs to be, especially on 4th downs. And Brandon Staley mentioned how good he was. So really can't wait for that one. Thursday night, kicking the week off with a really great matchup between 2. Yeah. One coach that's been really good for a long time and another one up and coming who had a really great year last year.
Yeah, it is a great matchup. Usually week 1, of course, traditionally is the Super Bowl winner in their first big game. But then typically the schedule for Thursday nights has really dropped off. So This is a big, big game with exciting superstars and high stakes for week 2. It's a great matchup for Thursday night. So that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, and that's something we were talking about. I think it was off the call earlier the other day, how The Monday and Thursday night games have been so bad recently, and they've been called out for it now with Amazon paying a lot of money for Thursday nights. Troy Aikman and Joe Buck going to Monday. Maybe we're actually going to be treated to some good Thursday night games, and this is a good one.
Monday night ratings. Monday night ratings were off the charts. So so far so good. I did enjoy Troy Aikman in his first game on ESPN. I can't tell you the details, but I don't know if it was mechanical issues or just the process of things going. But there were some changes to how he was used to doing business, and it was very clear he was not comfortable and pretty grumpy about the whole thing going in.
Yeah, I was actually on the Manning cast. I got onto that one last year and kind of stuck with it. And it was funny. That reminds me of I saw the tweet I think ESPN put out that Peyton, speaking of Nathaniel Hackett's fourth down, signaled for timeout or said timeout 62 times before Nathaniel Hackett and the Broncos finally called it.
I typically watch the Manning cast. I wanted to see what the ESPN show was like, and honestly, it's Joe Buck and Troy Aikman on ESPN. Is what do you expect?
Yeah, and it's not
my favorite clip in the end of that game. Everyone was talking about Peyton and the timeout signaling and calling, and he's trying to figure out what to do. But it's Peyton who, of course, won the Super Bowl at Denver, and their guest is Shannon Sharpe, who won a pair of Super Bowls with Denver, and they're trying to process what's going on. And like all of us, we're just confused as hell. And Peyton softly mutters, "They're going to kick it now." And Shannon Sharpe, at the top of his lungs, just shouts, "Kick what?" And, well, they kicked it. They did, in fact, kick what is what they did.
Yeah. Nathaniel Hackett, you were mentioning, the kicks in Denver must have – he knew he was coaching for Denver, but forgot he wasn't in Denver, I guess.
I honestly think that's part of the process. Like, he watched this guy kick in practice. It's like, man, this guy's got the leg of a god, and I trust him in anywhere. And didn't take – it's not new. It's not like he started playing in football in Denver 2 years ago, but he didn't take weather effects and park effects and stadium effects into account, and then it caught him off guard. I honestly think that's part of what went down.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that was our worst decision of the week coming from there. There were some other bad decisions. We won't just hate on Nathaniel Hackett today. Again, nowhere to go but up for him. But Lovey Smith is a guy who's been around a while. He had another one, or had one of his own, that was pretty controversial. People on him. I don't think I talked about as much as it should have. Choosing to punt from midfield, 20 seconds left in overtime. It's a 4.5% drop in win probability by choosing to do that. He's pretty much saying, "Hey, I'm okay with a tie." It was right around midfield instead of staying aggressive and trying to win the game, just saying, "Hey, I'm going to punt it, play for a tie." And we see that occasionally, especially in overtime. Coaches kind of tense up a little bit. I guess not super surprising from Lovey Smith, but still, when a Texans team, you're not expected to win. You come in the game as an underdog. You've got to go for those and try and win that game.
I'm going to have more to say on this later in the coaching match this week too. But Houston built, I think it was a 20-3 lead, and essentially stopped playing football at that point. And their offense went ultra conservative, did nothing the rest of the game, and like you say, he was not even trying to win. Let's get out of this game with a tie, and that's what happened. And hey, he's in first place. So, it's bad, but I can see both sides of it. This is a young team trying to we've got the tie in hand. Let's not get greedy, right? Let's this is a young team that's trying to work hard to accomplish something. They've accomplished something. A tie is accomplishing something, everyone. A tie is accomplishing something. You came in here, you didn't get beat, and they let a better team off the ropes, maybe, but they win. I think it was in Indianapolis, wasn't it? Either way, they win the game. They win the game and fought to a stalemate, and that's an accomplishment. That's something you can build off of. So I understand that. And the other idea of it is we don't expect Houston to be very good. They had nothing to lose. They may as well have been aggressive, but he wasn't.
Yeah, and to be fair to your point, not expected to be good. I don't think this went into what Lovey Smith was thinking, but a win potentially hurts their draft stock in the end. Potentially needing a quarterback with a lot of other teams. I can't imagine he would pull the or at least what
I don't think that way in his decision making, but you're right.
Yeah, in the end, it could end up helping. A lot of times those ties hurt at the end of the season. This one could end up helping them. But a team that we know is probably not going to be, or probably going to be better than not very good this year is the Vikings. And first-year head coach Kevin O'Connell did not do the opposite. Was with Nathaniel Hackett. First-year coach is making some mistakes. 4th and 2 field goal from the Green Bay 5-yard line. They're up 7-3, just really dominating, even from the get-go. I'm a Packers fan, and just that was not a fun game. For some reason, decided not to cover Justin Jefferson at all. It's not like he came out of nowhere as a rookie this year, but choosing to kick the field goal there is a little surprising. They took the delay a game. I don't remember if that was on purpose. I know sometimes we see teams try and go up like they're going to draw them off sides, take a delay a game when you're that close on a field goal anyway, but then choosing to kick the field goal anyway. But we see a lot of those, if it's not 4th and 1, those 4th and 2s where we expect them to go for it. A lot of times coaches don't when they're that close to the end zone.
Yeah, I thought they fired Mike Zimmer. I thought we were going to get a new and aggressive coach in Minnesota. I didn't watch much of the game, but in the circumstances, it's still early. It's still very much a football game, and I put up a Twitter poll about the biggest upset of the week. I didn't realize Minnesota was actually favored in that game. People are more down on Green Bay than I was, but apparently they were right. So,
yeah, Minnesota was my pick to overachieve their FO projection, and I picked them to win the division as well.
I picked Green Bay to go to the Super Bowl. I picked Green Bay to go to the Super Bowl. So far, I'm just covering myself in glory in week 1. But
actually, Green Bay was my Super Bowl pick as well in there. Even though I thought Minnesota would win the division, I did pick Green Bay. I think they get it together, but the week 1 was not good.
No. You like to see a team get more aggressive there. But I will say this: he was already ahead. If you're going to be conservative when you're protecting a lead. Don't be conservative when you're trying to catch up. But it is what it is. He kicked the field goal.
Yeah, and ended up winning the game. We'll get to he had another decision, a good decision we'll get to. Just want to talk about one more bad decision or error we have from this week, which is actually was one of the more surprising ones when I was going back through all the data yesterday and today. John Harbaugh choosing to punt from 4th and 1 at midfield against the Jets. I know we're pretty high on the Jets this year. They were originally projected top 10, I believe. After their week 1 performance, their Dave metric is now down to like 13 or 14. The defense, yes. Now down to like 13 or 14, but tied at 0 with you've got Lamar Jackson. I know they were missing J.K. Dobbins, but still have a ton of talent there on the offense. And it's John Harbaugh. He's been known as one of the more aggressive coaches, won our Coach of the Year award in that 2019 season where Lamar was MVP. Again, this is early. There's a lot of game to play, still expecting to win that game. But 4th and 1 at midfield is a tough one for me to see John Harbaugh kicking on.
All right, I'm going to defend Harbaugh on this one. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about how the numbers are a baseline and you need to adjust them for your specific circumstances.
Yep.
John Harbaugh's specific circumstances were Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Joe Flacco is not going to drive the length of the field and score on you. It's 2022, and the Jets are in a bad spot. It's just, and I don't know honestly how much better they can be with Zach Wilson. To be perfectly honest with you, but this was one where listen, we're better than these guys. Mm-hmm. We don't need to take a single gamble. We can just play it totally safe, play very, very timid, but in the end, our superior talent will beat theirs handily. And in the end, that's what happened. So, no, I'm with Coach on that one. I also would have punted and just waited.
Yep. So playing devil's advocate on that, though. So you've got Baltimore, superior talent. You go for it. You've got a really good chance of getting it. You don't get it. Joe Flacco might go 50 yards to score, or you might hold him to a field goal. In the end, you're still going to win, right? Most likely.
Sure. It's kind of a win-win scenario.
I was just about to say, you can't go wrong either way, but just wanted to play that devil's advocate side of it there too, because it is a 4th and 1 with Lamar.
And that's always very, very tempting, but I am not swayed. I also would have punted and just beaten Joe Flacco.
Yep.
That would have been
early in the game. It's definitely defensible. We'll see. I imagine late in the game, if it was close, he would not have.
If it was the 4th quarter, I would have gone for it. If it was still, I think it was tied at that point, or one score game, obviously.
Tied, no score. It was early.
Yes, it was tied in the 4th quarter. I would have gone for it. If tied in the first, no. We're just gonna win later. We don't have to win right now. We can win at the end.
Absolutely, and I agree. And Harbaugh would have gone for it. I would think 9 times out of 10 in the 4th quarter in a close game there. So we won't fault him too much. It was a little surprising, but we definitely can see that both of us do understand the reasoning there of him to play it safe, at least in the beginning, first game. So, but now we'll look at some coaches that did make some good decisions this week. Nick Sirianni chose to go for it 4th and 1 from the Detroit 40. This was our best 4th down call of the week. They were up 3 with only 1:09 left in the game after Detroit made that furious comeback, cut it to 38-35. Could have gone with a long field goal in the dome there to make it a 6-point game. We hate when they do that because a touchdown still beats you. He could have punted to try and pin them deep and make them go the length of the field to win, or make them still get 60 yards just to get a field goal to tie it, leaving it with just 1:09 left. Sirianni, though, made the choice to go for it. He was the second best rookie coach in our coach rankings overall last year, and in fourth down decision making. This was a really good call. It's good to see him go aggressive instead of take a chance on Detroit continuing their second half comeback and win that game or tie it and get them to overtime there.
Yeah, and I keep going back to circumstances, and the Eagles, the Ravens' circumstances were Joe Flacco. The Eagles' circumstances are Jalen Hurts, and the guy who runs as much as any quarterback, other than rookie Lamar Jackson who's ever seen. I think he had 16 carries in that game.
Yep.
Then led all quarterbacks
17, 90 yards.
Yeah, led all quarterbacks in rushing DER, and that drive, I was kind of watching at the corner of my eye because even as close as it was, I trusted Philly to finish it off, but they got the ball. I want to say it was almost 4 minutes to go, like 3:50 something, and they never gave it back, and they never threw a pass, and they just ran and ran and ran. They converted third downs, and as you noted here, they converted a fourth down, and that was it. And as much as teams need to build around the pass and stopping the pass, and that's how you win games in 2022. That's the most important thing in winning games in 2022. It is nice to see someone just out physical the other team. Just like watching Nebraska run the wishbone in the 70s. Just, we're going to run all over you. You can't stop us, and we're going to take our ball. We're going to go home with a win. And that's a fun kind of football to watch when it's working.
Yeah. Like I said, that's exactly what they did. He had a good one earlier in the game, too. 4th and goal at the 1. Again, that's when we talk about coaches. Pretty obvious. We do still see some field goals there, but going for it. They're down 7. Again, Jalen Hurts had 10 rushing touchdowns last year. The guy that can get it done at the goal line. They've got A.J. Brown now. Like, if they ever have a 4th and goal at the 1, I imagine Sirianni is going for that every time, unless it's into the first half, late in the game, they're tied, field goal to win it in those obvious situations. But still, he had our top 2 calls of the week on 4th downs from Sirianni. So continuing that forward from last year and his aggressiveness, which we love to see. Again, against it, I would still say I think we all would agree Detroit is an inferior opponent. They are going to be better. They played tough in a lot of their games last year, but those are ones where he knew, you said, you just take the ball, out muscle, you get the first down, do what we have to do to win the game. And you love to see it.
Yeah, Dan Campbell's Lions are like the most entertaining bad team.
Yes,
because they play like an underdog, and he tried a surprise onside kick in this game because he knew he was playing from behind and needed to take some gambles, and they're feisty, and they fell behind. They rallied, and they had a chance to force one stop and get the ball back with a chance to take the lead, and they just couldn't get it done because they're still a bad team. But God, they're fun to watch.
They did the exact same thing week 1 last year against San Francisco. Came out, got down big, ended up coming back and going for 2, I think, at the end of the game, and covered the spread, lost by like 7, but covered.
Mm-hmm. And they had a game against the Rams. Of course, were eventually Super Bowl champions, a much better team, and they knew it. They played like it. There was an onside kick. There was multiple fake punts.
Remember that.
Yeah. So like I say, there's no more fun bad team to watch. And plus, they are better than last year. DeAndre Swift had the 50-yarder that set up a touchdown to put them ahead. The explosive players there. Amon-Ra St. Brown's exciting. There's players to watch here who are fun.
Yeah, Aiden Hutchinson there too.
Aiden Hutchinson.
I think had a sack in his first game. Had a sack early on in that one, I think.
I'd have to check, which I can't.
Yeah, could be wrong, but yeah, a lot of excitement, and we'll be a much better team there. Still probably won't compete for the division there in the NFC North with Green Bay or Minnesota, but yeah, much just fun to watch. And those are the kind of teams that pretty much everyone cheers for, unless you're playing against them, and then it's just annoying. But staying in that division, we mentioned Kevin O'Connell did have that bad call. We disagreed with. He did also have a good call, though. 4th and 1 at the Green Bay 5 on the opening possession. Early on, this is a 5% increase in win probability. That's a lot to see on an opening possession. Made the decision to go for it, and they scored a touchdown on the play. So really, that's to me kind of a set the tone kind of thing as well, especially a new coach coming in with a good team. A lot of people are high on Minnesota this year to go all the way down the field in like 6 minutes and then just get a field goal out of that. you'd love to come away with the points, but him saying, we're going to go for it, 1 yard to go, and end up scoring the touchdown, you really love to see as a Vikings fan. Like you said, too, Mike Zimmer's no longer there. Probably would have taken the field goal there if it's Mike Zimmer.
It's really, really weird that he went for it on 4th and 1 at the 5, and then shortly thereafter kicked it on 4th and 2 at the 5. 1 yard made that much of a difference in his decision making. I guess that 1 yard did make that much of a difference in his decision making.
I guess having the lead, or being the opening possession versus they had the lead on the second one, they were up 7-3, I think it was, and to make it a 7-point game early. But and you see that a lot, don't you? Where coaches, they do one thing and then later on the same game they do the opposite.
That's a very Mike Tomlin thing to do. Not so much last year, but a year or two ago, he had a season where every game he would vacillate from one drive to the next on whether he was going to be aggressive on 4th downs or not, and you never knew what he was going to do, and it just let you scratching your head. And I don't know if anyone ever figured out what his process was, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And that's the nature of being aggressive, and sometimes being conservative is the right call, or at least it works out better. But there was no pattern to it. There's no rhyme or reason to it, which is, it feels like it should be concerning because it feels like the coach doesn't have a plan, but maybe he knows something we don't. Maybe Mike Tomlin knew something we didn't then, and maybe Kevin O'Connell knew something about this Green Bay defense that we don't, and he trusted them to get 1 yard and didn't trust his offense to get 2.
Yeah, and you mentioned Mike Tomlin kind of going back and forth within games. That's something that I noticed. It was either last year or the year before with Andy Reid. He has been this aggressive coach, especially being in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. But we saw in a couple games on like the first drive or the second drive, they get down to a 4th and goal at the 2, or 4th and 1 at the 2 or the 3, and he'd kick the field goal, go for the easy points, not guaranteed points, but the easier points. And then later on, when it mattered, he would go for it when he had to. It's almost like you said with John Harbaugh, where he knows we're better than you are. I'm going to take a field goal here, may come in handy later, and I know in the long run we're going to beat you. And it seemed like that's the way Andy Reid played it. Like, again, it was either last year or 2 years ago, but in a similar way. Maybe Tomlin was thinking the same thing. I don't know.
If I knew the answer, I don't know what I would have done if I knew the answer, but I don't know the answer.
We don't, but we can only speculate, and that's what we do. But we do have the numbers, and again, that Kevin O'Connell plus 5.2% in win probability. So good on him. They scored the touchdown, obviously giving them even more win probability after the play. And then there's one more, just one like Zack Taylor, 4th and 1 at the Pittsburgh 35. This is one that I think you could see a lot of coaches go either way. There's only 1:17 left in the second quarter. They're down by 14 at this point. A lot of times, I think, from games that I watched over the last few years as I'm running this model live through every single game, trying to catch every single 4th down I could with the Edge Sports model, could have kicked the field goal just to get some points before the half and make it 17-6 instead of 17-3. Still a long field goal, reasonable for Evan McPherson, but he went for it. They got it. They still ended up getting a field goal, but gave themselves the opportunity for a touchdown, which really is the big thing with a lot of these 4th downs in these medium field goal ranges. Like, yes, you can get the points in there. You're a fairly good likelihood of making the kick, but it's the chance to get a touchdown, and people underestimating their chances of converting on that 4th down to then go on and get into to score a touchdown.
Yeah, the weirdest part of that is that they were down by 2 touchdowns. You would think if ever there was a time to need 7 points, that would be it. And on the other hand, much as I said, the Ravens' circumstances were Joe Flacco, the Bengals' circumstances were Mitchell Trubisky. And even though their quarterback and their offense had made more mistakes than Trubisky and the Steelers up to that point, you could reasonably expect the Bengals to have a better offense over the rest of the game. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. At the same time, he kicked this field goal and came back and was in position to win twice at the end. But Evan McPherson missed a pair of kicks in large part because they had, at that point in the game, a backup long snapper. I don't know if they had a backup long snapper going into the game. But if you watch those 2 kicks, they got the kicks off, but the snaps are not good. Ace Ventura would have been very unhappy about the laces in on one of those kicks, but also the snaps are, the holder has to almost stand up to catch the ball and bring it back down onto the ground. So anyway,
that was the one in overtime, the high snap where they kicked it on 3rd down in case something like that happens, and instead of just falling on it and getting a chance to kick it again, they chose to he put it down, in the heat of the moment, but still put it down and let him kick it, and it didn't work out. But
yeah, but as this fourth and one in the end, I can see both sides of this one, honestly. But being down 14 points at that point, I pretty sure I would have gone for it.
Yeah. Well, on this one, he did go for it on this one. They converted, and then ended up having to just getting a field goal before the half. Sorry,
I misunderstood. But
so yeah,
okay, I wouldn't have done what he did.
Yeah, you agree. You agree with exactly what he did.
Way to go, Zach!
And that's Zack Taylor has been a little hit or miss with his aggressiveness over the last couple of years. I remember the San Francisco game, both he and Kyle Shanahan last year had some fourth and shorts where they kicked field goals where we would have liked to see them go for it. But when it really, really matters, it seems like he makes the right decision more often than not, knowing, like you said, they've got a really good offense, some really good receivers. Joe Burrow, he's going to put his trust in those guys like we ask some other teams to do when they don't. So moving on now to our last segment, we're going to look ahead now. Instead of just looking back, we want to look ahead at some of our best coaching matchups we're most looking forward to in week 2. Vince, I guess I'll go ahead and I'll let you start with yours. I know you alluded to it earlier in the show, so I'll let you move on with that.
So I'm looking at this Houston Texans at Denver Broncos game in week 2. We mentioned earlier how conservative Houston was after they build their lead, 20-3 lead. And then here's their drives for the rest of the game. First one was a punt in which they ran 12 plays to only gain 58 yards. They lost a fumble, and they punted and punted and punted and punted. And we talked about the last one already and how conservative that one in particular was. So he needs to show that when his team has a chance to win, that he can finish the job. He can kind of, drive that nail in the coffin and get that done. We've already talked about Nathaniel Hackett's end of game decision, but we have not talked much about what happened in the prior 59 minutes, which was this team, it's been discussed that they sat most of their stars in the preseason, and this looked like a team that was playing a preseason game. They were totally disorganized. There were communication breakdowns. There were delay of game violations or plays snapped right up against the play clock. The defense had a ton of penalties. I think in the end it was 7 first downs by penalty for the Seattle offense that Denver just gave up to Seattle. There's breakdowns in coverage. Seattle's biggest plays were when Denver just forgot tight ends existed. And, hey, here's Will Dissly with nobody within 20 yards. I've forgotten the other guy's name. Colby Parkinson getting behind everybody. Colby Parkinson taking your team deep, everyone. That's an issue. Now, the good news is the defense seemed to fix those up in the second half. After halftime, whatever adjustments they made were much better because no one's talking about this, but Seattle's offense died in the second half. Nothing. Oh, yeah. So this probably won't be a close game. I think Denver will win comfortably. They're, last I checked, a 9.5-point favorite. I'd probably take them to cover that, honestly. But both coaches here have a lot to prove, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle things.
Yeah, see if, like we talked about, Nathaniel Hackett learning from his mistakes in week 1 as far as the fourth down decision goes and coming out against a team they should be. The talk all week has been, you paid Russell Wilson all this money, taking the ball, out of his hands, a similar thing we saw with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay against the Bucs a couple of years ago, trusting him. And they should come out and win this game. But, yeah, that will be an interesting one, I think. One that people are going to be looking at to see how Denver bounces back as well. Mine, I'm going to take, moving on, go to Indianapolis and Jacksonville. Stick with a couple AFC South teams. For me, looking at the two coaches, you got Frank Reich and you've got Doug Peterson. They were together for that Super Bowl in Philadelphia. Can't forget Indianapolis hasn't won at Jacksonville since 2014. We all know what happened in Week 18 last year. That performance by Carson Wentz was not good at all, kept them out of the playoffs eventually. So we know they're both aggressive too. Sometimes Reich is faulted a little bit for being too aggressive. But Indianapolis, is going to want to come out and get a win. Jacksonville had a chance to beat Washington last week. Probably should have. They had Doug Peterson did go for it on a 4th and goal in the first half. Were not able to convert that. Had some turnovers, really hurt themselves a lot, but I think this will be a pretty close game. Jacksonville, a much improved team. I know Aaron picked it, or not picked them, but said, it's not crazy to see them win I think he said 7, 8, 9 games in one of those shows in the preseason. And Indianapolis just really underperformed. No, they came. I think you said Houston was up. Indianapolis came back. They had a good comeback. But Matt Ryan really kind of underwhelmed in his debut. Mike Tenier said this on our show on Monday. Really just not impressed with his debut. Going to have to do a lot better. So see how both of those teams come out. And we know this year at least Jacksonville will be prepared for this game as opposed to last year. The preparation that Urban Meyer had for them, he's gone. So going to see with these two coaches again. They know each other well. They're both very aggressive, and I'm excited to see how that one plays out.
We are experimenting starting this week, actually, with staff picks, favorite bet, prop bets, that sort of thing. And one of them is upset watch. Which team do you think is most likely to pull off a significant upset this week? And I haven't put the whole thing together yet. I'm actually going to go work on that right now. But skimming it this morning, Jacksonville, excuse me, I think they're a 4-point underdog. But Jacksonville winning straight up is a very popular choice among the Football Outsider staff.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I was just putting mine in not too long ago, and Jackson. Someone made a comment like, "Hey, we're all picking the same game." It looks like, but yeah, Jacksonville popular is a lot better than they were last year. Trevor Lawrence kind of getting a reset, I think, with the new coaching staff.
I picked Jacksonville as my team to beat the DVOA projection, and I did watch the Washington game pretty closely. I also felt that they should have won. They beat themselves. Many mistakes in scoring range, and they should have scored a lot more points. They definitely left points in the field. And mostly I'm just convinced they have a great addition by subtraction because they no longer have the worst coach any of us has ever seen. Yes, including Nathaniel Hackett.
Absolutely. Yeah, no Urban Meyer. So mentioned the upset pick there. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow. Tom Strachan and I will have our weekly show going out tomorrow that covers every single game. We look at the betting perspective, the fantasy perspective, daily fantasy as well. That'll go out. And again, Football Outsiders, our FO Plus subscription, you can get access to the NFL picks as well as picks against the spread and picks straight up based on confidence, based on our model with an FO Plus subscription. Again, at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. And then don't forget about that underdog promo as well, where you can get a free $100. That's right. They will give you up to $100 deposit match on your deposit with promo code OUTSIDERS. Thank you for joining us for our first Coach Ranking show. We'll be here again every week on Wednesday. Vince coming to us in the morning for him, I think. But I'll be here in the afternoon, and we'll be looking at some of the biggest decisions like we did today, good and bad, from the week before, and then previewing those matchups that we're most looking forward to in the coming week. Vince, thank you for joining me, and enjoy the game. We're already one day away from week 2.
It's crazy, isn't it? Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.